Hey, welcome to this week's podcast episode. Welcome to this week's episode of The Slow Learner. This week we've got a really special guest who's been a friend of mine for years, and we got to reconnect on this episode, kind of like me and Brent did last week. But me and Darcy have shared more time in the trench together, doing various different things, and I really love this interview. Even though the sound's a little bad and the video's a little shitty, the actual conversation, if you kind of listen to it, it shows how incredibly complex, deep, and thoughtful Darcy is. I mean, now that he's sort of a internet superstar, we kind of forget, like, these little comedic moments of his are actually fueled and motivated by an incredibly thoughtful guy who's proud and open about his change and development. And I found it really moving. Now, we recorded this about a month and a bit ago, and since that recording, some difficult times have hit Darcy and Jer, so they've had to cancel their tour this year. So before I even start, I'd like to mention that they'd outlaid a whole bunch of money, getting this tour going and getting out there to see their fans and stuff like that, and it's kind of gone south because Jer got a pretty difficult diagnosis about his health, and they've had to rightfully cancel the tour and step back and focus on Jer. So there's a GoFundMe that was started for them, and I'm going to put a link for it in the comments section. So if you're interested, please, if you can, drop a couple bucks down there to maybe help Darcy and Jer get through this. And if not, make sure that when they get back on the road, get tickets, go to their shows, support them, give back a little bit of the love that these two have kind of given a bit of guidance to the rest of us, to laugh at our problems, at our foibles, at our difficulties, and support them, because it's important. It's important to support those people that make you laugh and that are joyful. And Darcy's a great example of this, especially as a Canadian. He's loved this country. He's always pushed for Canadian content and comedy in his career, and he's one of those people that I admire quite a bit. Even though he was really irritating when I first met him, he'd laugh at that. So I'm really happy about this episode. I'm happy I got to reconnect with Darcy, and then afterwards, me and Professor Whistle are going to talk about some of the ideas we discussed in this episode, particularly about ADHD, its impact on comedy, and how it affects our brains and the underlying sort of aspects of it that make it very difficult to diagnose, to sort of engage with. So all in all, this is a really personal episode for me as well, because I too suffer from ADHD and had a late in life diagnosis. And we talk about this, and there's a lot of sort of heart opening and sharing. And I think this is the kind of thing I would have hated 20 years ago. If I watched, I'd be like, ew. But I just sat through and did some minor edits on it, although I kept as much as I could. And I'm strangely quite proud of it. So I hope you are too. So without further ado, give it a listen. This is episode 2 of the Slow Learner podcast with Darcy Michael from Darcy and Jer, and Professor Whistle and I pop on afterwards. And this is the last week when me and Professor Whistle go after the interview. Starting next week, because I hate editing, we're all on the same episode at the same time, and I think you'll hopefully appreciate that smoothness a little better. But until then, hope you enjoyed this one, and I'll see you in 2 weeks on Tuesday again.
Oh, this is great. I get to hang out with you. It's been years.
I know. I kind of feel like this is just my sort of way of reconnecting with people.
Yeah. Like, hey, I fucked off for 5 years, but I'm back.
It's so weird. Like doing, like, I don't know how to feel about it, because I know I needed to psychologically do something different, but it really like impacts comedy. Like people think that you forget all that. Oh, you've been away for 5 years. There's no way you can do it again. I'm like, what?
Yeah. It's like riding a bike.
yeah. It's like, okay, all right. But it is learning all the new sort of industry. What?
Have you been getting back up on stage?
Oh yeah.
How's it going?
Oh, great. Yeah. My only disappointment is as I fall back on some of my presence skills more than my writing skills. Like really good in the moment.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting is I'm integrating in the moment stuff with my psychological training and my cognitive science training. So I've started doing this thing where I'm diagnosing hecklers.
That's great. That's great because they need it.
Yeah, I try to imagine what part of the brain is damaged, like the medial OFC that creates a disconnect between the consensus of self and the outward sort of reflective appearance of self, and sort of self-monitoring and the characteristics of knowing when you're behaving poorly in a social environment. You can't see it at that moment, but you do recognize it if you watch it from a third party, if it's shown to you on video. There's all these neat little sort of psychological impacts of brain damage. And the OFC gets damaged a lot in people that have a lot of frontal impact, like punching or car accidents. So they lose this ability to sort of self-moderate in certain cases, So that's one of my go-tos if somebody's like particularly not learning.
Yeah, oh, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. And typically people at comedy shows tend to have a lot of frontal lobe damage anyway. So
it should be called the frontal lobe clubs.
Then they wouldn't know what they're in for.
Okay, so I'm just gonna sort of do a loose start. This is I'm Pete Johansson. I'm the slow learner of the slow learner. It's taken me years to get just here, and I'm which is a little corner of my living room. I'm here with Darcy Michael of Darcy and Jer fame. The thing. My dad used to think that was a symbol of witchcraft.
It probably is. Witches want nothing but peace.
My dad, I don't think, was right about anything except one thing: is never back up farther than you absolutely have to. It's the only piece of advice I've ever kept from.
That's actually great advice for gay men.
How come?
Never back up farther than you have to. Do I have to walk you through this?
I think that you're being a bit sexist with that comment, because I think a lot of people can enjoy that, what you're discussing. I think that what you're alluding to, at least.
We're 6 minutes into this and you're already calling me sexist. Great.
I'm sorry, but there's a lot of straight men that are pushing their own boundaries and enjoying some aspects of that. Sure. And I don't think any sexual pleasure should be limited to one class.
I only speak from my own experience.
Fuck, I miss talking to you.
It's good to see you, buddy.
We used to have such great sort of in-the-moment conversations about crazy in-the-moment situations.
I honestly think back to those green room days back at the comedy mix, and like how had we known how lucky we had it back then, just the camaraderie and the being able to just hang out with a couple of jackasses and try and make each other laugh. I think I would go home after shows some nights being like, didn't have a great set, crushed it in the green room, still got it.
I really think Vancouver had a magic, and I don't want to isolate or feel people othered by this comment if your comedy community actually had it too, but I think Vancouver had a special type of magic for the community that I didn't see in other places.
For sure. I think there was way more support and less competition in Vancouver. I also say that Vancouver was the best training ground for a comedian because of the diversity of the audience. Yeah. We had to work smarter to be able to win over an entire audience. Whereas, I always say, comedy got easier and easier as you went across the country until you went to St. John's, because no one is funnier than the audience in St. John's. They're the funniest people in the world.
That's the only province I haven't been to. I still haven't been to Newfoundland. Yeah, I got to get there.
Jared and I just went. We were there for 5 days in September. We had 2 shows there, and it was just the most fun. We went from there to Ireland, and we were excited for Ireland, and then realized we're we're already in Ireland. We're in St. John. It's the same thing.
That's my favorite Newfie joke. I forget who used to mention it. Might have been Chris Finn. Used to say a common Newfie saying was, "How far does this road go? Oh, she goes all the way to Ireland, but she's washed out at the lighthouse."
That's so stupid. I love it. I love it.
It really captures the Newfie sense of humor, you know? Yeah, they're wonderful
It really
people.
does.
I keep mentioning I gotta contact Mark Critch because he's one of those people that said you should do a podcast, which is basically which I take with a grain of salt because that's basically that dress looks great on you now. Like it's just the go-to pleasantry that people hand out to everybody. Oh no, you should have a podcast. Really? Me?
Yeah.
So
you should voice your opinions to the Ethernet. I don't even know.
Yeah, there's two places I remember specifically us having a very funny time. It could have been the marijuana, but was the one in St. John, not St. John's. What was that one?
Hubcap Comedy Festival in Moncton.
Yeah, Moncton. My bad. That was great. And then Just for Laughs. The last time we were at Just for Laughs together, we got hammered in Sloss's room, Daniel Sloss's.
I do remember.
Did I ever tell you that next morning I woke up and I was still really drunk and I had to fly to Amsterdam at 9 a.m. to do the club that week?
That's the worst.
And I felt great. And then I got to the airport and like maybe an hour before the plane boarded, it hit me like just bam. Yeah. And I thought I was going to die. And it's the only time I've upgraded my seat to first class. Like it cost me so much. It cost me everything I made at the festival.
Yeah, of course it would. I have never enjoyed. I hate with a passion the Montreal airport because I have never been able to board a flight there in tip-top shape. Every time the festival ends, I get to that airport being like, please, someone give me a noose. Like, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. It breaks my brain every time how stupid I am. Because I'm also like, put me on the first flight out. Every time I'm leaving, I'm like, get me home as quickly as possible. But then when the party ends at 4:30 and they're like, your driver's here in 15 minutes to pick you up, you're like, it's the worst.
I always opt for the late flights. It's just let me sleep in as late as possible. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not a great sleeper in hotel rooms. So I'm like, I'm not going to get a ton of sleep. So I'd rather get home, especially being on the West Coast. I get home and I have like the full day.
So that's the only thing I can't wrap my head around with your success is that I know you well enough that you are talented, you deserve all the success in the world, but your personality seems like it would not handle all the extra stress as well as like, because I feel like you enjoy life. You've always enjoyed life.
For sure.
And it would seem like managing all that stuff and when I found out you had an assistant, I was so happy because the day I can afford an assistant, oh man,
it's a game changer. You know, like it's funny because our assistant actually lives in Ottawa, but we had hired her. She works with my agency as well, and we had started using her while she lived out here, and we were like, we'll continue using you. But there's days where I'm like, fuck, I wish you were in this room right now so you could just deal with this shit. It's a weird thing because, like, you know, I never want to float my own boat, but I don't think people realize like how the work is. And it's nonstop. We have, you know, like we just finished 20 months of touring, one show. The special and documentary came out the same day we announced our new tour, which starts in 2 months. So I'm currently frantically, if you could see this wall right now, it's full of all the jokes that, you know, like Jer and I are going to do another 90-minute show where we are walking out on night one to untested material.
I freaking love that Jer's part of this so much.
It's so weird. It's so weird.
Yeah. If you would have talked to me 15 years ago, Jer's going to be like a huge star. Like, yeah. Jer's going to be married to a huge star.
Yeah. Yeah. He likes to say, it turns out I needed help all this time.
I love that though, and
it's great.
You and Jer have been together a little longer than me in court, but we've both been together quite a long time.
We're 22 years.
Yeah, we're 17.
Wow,
isn't that
Has
nuts?
it been 7? Have we? That means we've known each other. Yeah, almost 20 years. That's wild.
Did you get that pic I sent the other day to Candace?
Yeah, I did. Candace sent it to me.
I have no idea where that's from, but I
Mm.
know that's mid 2000s.
That's Balthazar's. That's actually at Erwin Barker's memorial.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. When you sent it to me, I was like, wow, we were babies saying goodbye to an icon that no one now would even know.
Oh man, he was so awesome.
He was great. He was so fucking funny, and so talented. I still think about, he had that great joke about eating rabbit, where it's like there's something so delicious about it. It's like you can taste the trust.
Yeah. You want a rabbit that's been raised by a kid with a lot of love.
Yeah, that's what it is. That's what it is. I butchered it. Oh, I'm so sorry, Erwin. I'm so sorry. If you want to go down a rabbit hole, anyone listening, go and look at Erwin Barker's stuff on YouTube. He was a true icon.
And he also he was a nice guy. He was a talented, dedicated. He was first work ethic. Him and Brent were the two work ethics, because none of us had a work ethic. At least you did. You had a little bit of one. I always noticed that.
I always credit Brent. I read an interview with Brent early on when this reporter had asked him like how he got so successful and got Corner Gas. It was when it first came out. And he said, I made sure I was the first comedian awake. I knew most comics were getting up at noon, so I started getting up at 9 and having 3 hours to email bookers, to do my writing and stuff. And I was like, yeah, all right, I can do that. Like, I get up at 5, 6 a.m. every day now, and have for years. I write for the first 2 or 3 hours a day and then carry on with the rest of it.
Oh my God. I
can't do late shows anymore.
But this is why I'm a slow learner. I'm just learning this now, and I'm 30 years. And it's funny because I stayed with Brent for a week once at his place when he first moved to Vancouver, and I remember him waking up early, and I remember I'd wake up and we'd be having like breakfast, and he'd be like, "Hey, let's write some top 10 lists. Hey, do you want to do some jokes?" And I'd be like, "I want to kind of smoke pot."
That was my other thing. I never smoked weed until Oprah came on.
That's so smart. Yeah.
4 p.m. That was when I was allowed to. Yeah, it's funny because like now with my ADHD diagnosis, I've learned over the last few years, because I take medication for it, but I don't enjoy what the medication sometimes does to my creativity. And that's why if I get up at 6, I'll take my medication 3 hours later, and I'll allow myself those 3 hours in the morning to let my brain wander, because that's where a lot of my material comes from, is, subconsciously thinking of something while I'm, puttering around or whatever. But learning that, and then knowing, okay, like my rules are get up early, take the meds 3 hours later, don't smoke weed till 4 o'clock. If I can do those 3 things, I've had a pretty successful day.
I'm gonna like take notes from this, and I'm gonna try. I want to learn something from everybody I have on the show every week, and
That's great.
I think that's one thing I want to learn, is that sort of regiment that I enjoy too. Like,
do you still smoke pot?
I didn't for like a month and a half, and this is weird.
Over the last 5 years since we spoke?
Oh no. Okay, so when I went, I didn't smoke much pot at university. If ever, I didn't, because it impacted my study habits. Because I would get up at like 7 or 8 and start working on because I do my best studying and my best writing in the morning. So for school research and papers, I'd write them all between like 8 and noon. That would be my productive time. But
you're already doing it. We're just doing it at different times. I'm doing it West Coast time.
But I never ever once applied that to comedy. Comedy is. I always say it's the path of least resistance for me, because it was the easiest job I could find for my entire life, and that's why I did it. And I didn't realize how much of that was part of my ADHD. This is one of the reasons I wanted you here, and why I wanted to talk to you, is because we have kind of similar journeys to ADHD, and I love how you talk about it. I love that you're open about it. I love that you share the experiences on it. And I like how you talk about the social dynamics as well as the other impacts, like with Jer, like, because me and my wife go through, she's had become a caretaker or an external memory source for a lot of things. And I feel terribly guilty about it. But
It's
she
a
loves
weird
it.
one. I do too. Jer is he's a caregiver in his personality. Like Jer wants to take care of people. So for him, it's his way of being rewarded, I guess. But for me, some days I'm like, I wish I didn't have you here to remind me to drink water, because I should know that, like, literally, I even said to him before, because my office is on the backside of the property, and I was like, it's really cold outside. Don't bring me water. I'll, like, you just curl up by a fire. And so when I came to walk out to the office, there were 3 bottles of water at the back door. And I was like, okay, well, that's very sweet. It's an interesting thing. Like, we never expected to talk ADHD, especially during COVID, because it was still such an early diagnosis for me. I'd only been diagnosed the year before. And then it started in our comment section. People were like, hey, like, you're saying this is because he's a stoner, but that's actually like signs of ADHD. And we're like, oh yeah, no, we know, like, I have ADHD, but we just think it's funnier to blame it on being a stoner. And then Jer was the one that said to me, he was like, I think if you're more comfortable talking about it, it's gonna mean more to the audience. Like, instead of just passing it off as being an aloof stoner, like, actually be like, hey, I do this because of whatever. And if we can do it in a comedic way, I think it's going to really kind of find an audience. And I think the power of the algorithm, especially early on and on TikTok specifically, really helped drive that audience. But everything we were seeing about ADHD online was very scientific and factual and fucking boring and remorseful. And I was just like, fuck that.
Hey, I want you to elaborate on that remorseful. Explain that to me.
I think a lot of people were just going, like, I always say to people, listen, when you first get diagnosed with ADHD, you are going to go through this mourning period.
Yes.
You are going to look back, especially late diagnosis, especially, like in women in their 40s it's really hard for them, because women have to learn to mask early on in life, whether they're ADHD or not. But then so for me, I'll only speak about me personally, because I don't want to speak about women's journeys in general. But for me, I had to look back and go, oh my God, those 36 jobs I had between the age of 14 and 22. Oh my God, those friendships that I fucked up because I couldn't recognize hyperfixation or body doubling, or the biggest one was rejection sensitivity dysphoria. Like, that ruined some of the most beautiful relationships I had in my life. And so you mourn this, and it's really hard to just forgive yourself, but you have to, because it's not your fucking fault. Nobody said it to you. Nobody helped you. Nobody said, hey, this is the way. And so then when we started looking at the content that was being put out, it was in this remorseful, apologetic kind of way, where people were putting out content about rejection sensitivity or body doubling, being like, it just felt very down. And I was just like, like, I get this. This is all part of our little iceberg, but it is also an incredible gift. It is something that some of the greatest inventors, scientists, politicians, artists have ADHD, because our brain is fired. Our brain is working. And what a fucking great thing to celebrate. What a great thing to go, you know what? Yeah, I've got these other things, but I also have an amazing comedy career. I have one of the, like, a highly successful relationship. I have a daughter that I'm proud of because she's learned to live outside of the lines. Like, most people live in black and white, and ADHD is in this beautiful gray. I can respect your rules and your laws some of the time, but other times I'm going to go, yeah, you know what? Here's a little shortcut. And so I just said to Jared, I was like, if we're going to do this, if we're going to be putting this content out, it has to be joyful. It has to make someone that is potentially going through that mourning period, it has to say to them, hey, we're the light, come this way,
God, that's there's a emotional maturity to that. That's just, it's inspiring to hear.
Taking a long time, but
I know, but it's so nice to see. Like, I got to be honest. I struggled for years with my
ego.
Sort of, well, that played into it. I've always that's a family trait, which is even weirder. Like, everybody in my family has this insane confidence about ourselves that has no basis in reality whatsoever. Like, we were
I don't think that's a
like, my mom raised us like exiled princes. You know, it's kind of
great.
bizarre. Like, we
beautiful.
weren't allowed ketchup in the house because that's peasant food.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Oh wow, that's deep. That's a deep cut. I'd go nuts without ketchup.
I know, but regardless of that, I don't push off my responsibilities for my own behavior and lack of maturity over time. But I did get a huge insight, and I rejected a lot of my diagnosis. I didn't want to believe it for a long time.
How long ago were you diagnosed?
It's got to be 7-8 years. It was a year before I went to university, so 2018,
okay, so you were
17.
Yes, you were around the same time I was. Yeah, I was 2018, so I'm 6 years in.
Yeah, I got diagnosed through a different problem, though. I was having, accordingly, I couldn't hear what people were saying. And on stage, I was melting down a lot. Like, like people, I'd get off stage, I'd have a good show, but I'd be really upset because all I heard was like two people.
Noise.
Yeah. And I thought, and they kept, and I lost my mind okay, I'm going to come clean about an incident that felt terrible at the time and terrible now, but I have to forgive myself. I was doing an Edinburgh show, and this woman kept making a noise all the way through my show, like, and I thought she was like hissing at me, and I kind of melted down, and I was like, "What the fuck? What can I do?" And her husband goes, oh, "She's got a ventilator. That's her laugh." And like, but I lost. I didn't know, I couldn't see, and I felt so terrible. And there was a reviewer there that night.
Oh, it's always the case.
And
like noise sensitivity. I literally just put out on Threads. What did I just say?
Well, I bought your loops that you recommended, eh?
Oh yeah, they're great. They're amazing. Yeah. But my favorite is I can't read this text because the noise in this room is too loud. You know, like,
right?
And when I clued into the my inability to comprehend things because of noise, especially noisy environments, like Jer knows to just not try to talk to me at an airport. I have to put my headphones or my loops in and just fucking get through it.
I love Jer.
You know, like, he's great. The problem is, and I'm saying this, I really want to preface anything I complain about in this interview as what Jer and I call zero world problems. We know how good our life is, and we're very grateful for it. Unfortunately, part of the byproduct of fame is fans can get really excited, and in the wrong environment, I can react poorly to it. So like, if we were at South by Southwest a couple of years ago, crazy busy, noise everywhere, and a fan came up and grabbed me from behind, and I don't like being touched, so that already I was like, oh my god. But then the noise and this person screaming in my face, it was just so much that I just walked away, because I was like, hey, I'm sensitive to this shit. And like, looking back on my life, I'm like, oh wow, like this has been consistent. Like, my parents telling me about like me flipping out at Disneyland because of this or something, and me, like, looking back at it and going, holy shit, like, these are things that I really need to find tools to help me.
So have you been diagnosed specifically with audio processing disorder?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's how it came for me as well.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, it would, right?
So I went to an audiologist, and they tested my hearing, and it was perfect. Like, she goes, you actually have really good hearing. And I'm like, but I can't hear conversation. She goes, well, let me do a test. We normally do this on children, but I'll do it on adults because this is usually caught earlier. And we did this thing, and I'm like, she's like, okay, can we do it again? I think something's wrong. She's like, oh, wow. Okay, so you can't at all direct your attention with your hearing. And I'm like, yeah, what?
Right.
And she's, this is a brain problem, not a hearing problem. And she goes, it usually comes with a lot of comorbidities, like other sensory issues. Like, you have problems with it? And I have terrible sensory issues with smell, light. I don't have lights on.
It's funny. I remember you having a freak out about the smell of Jane Stanton's perfume once.
Oh God, perfume. And I can't be around perfume.
No, but like it was actually, because I was like, are you on drugs? Like, what? This is not, we were backstage at, or not backstage, we were at the one on Broadway that lasted like a week or two, and you had to stand outside. It was, Greg Kettner's room. I think we did it once.
Okay.
But I remember you having to go and stand outside because of her perfume.
Yeah.
Continue anyways.
No, but that's actually probably, I would say, even stronger than my audio is my smell. It integrates into, and also because it integrates deeply into emotional recall, that it can have like some powerful mental transitions, because your olfactory system is the only one that bypasses a lot of your processing, because it uses a different nerve system into your brain. Yeah.
Just a direct hit.
Yeah. It's got like a glial framework that goes basically straight into your brain. The other are processed through sort of an integration system. So it can affect your amygdala and its association with sort of, or the hippocampal sort of recollections of emotional memory deeply. Sorry, that I went off into my school shit. The professor will come on later and say, "No, Pete, you didn't learn properly."
Yeah.
So, she goes, this also almost always comes with ADHD, and so she referred me to a psychiatrist, and he's the greatest guy ever. I just adored him. He was this like really old Polish psychiatrist. He'd been around for like 40 years, but he was up on everything. Like he was a voracious reader, and rather than diagnose, like we went through all the tests, we did the diagnosis, but he goes, I don't want to do this if you don't believe me, because I didn't believe him. I go, like, isn't that just me being lazy? This is because everybody called me lazy all my life and all these things.
Yeah,
but
of course.
He gave me the book written by the guy that first did the imaging and the electroencephalographs and the PET scanning of the brains to show the actual differences between this ADHD functionality and this. And then in between each chapter where the sort of person that sort of identified it as the cause, he would have a story, an anecdote of different people in it, and what their experiences were and their sort of general outlines. And this is the remorse thing, because the first two didn't really respond to me, but then the third one was like, it was my story. And I remember just fucking bawling my eyes out.
It's hard, man. It's hard. Especially as clowns, because that's what we are. We're clowns in the most beautiful sense. I don't say it in a negative way, but like, we are outward people. And when we are put in those spots where we have to go and do the work, it fucking hurts, because you're opening up stuff that you've ignored for a long time. I don't know if I've ever told this, but my story of getting diagnosed was really weird, because I was in LA. I'd gotten a development deal. So as someone that has experienced that, the ego is driving most things. We had hired a showrunner, and we had the producers and I and my co-writer were staying in a mansion in the Hollywood Hills. Like, everything was perfect. The showrunner arrives. He's an icon of mine, an idol, someone that I've been dying to work with for a long time. And within an hour of us sitting there, Bruce McCullough turns to me and he goes, "How long have you had ADHD?" And I'm not lying to you when I say I was 38 years old, and it was the first time someone had ever said that to me. And all it did was cause this spiral in my brain for the rest of the week, where I was like, what is he fucking talking about? ADHD. And what I have now confirmed as ADHD rage. And so when I got home, after what turned out to be a not very successful writing week, because I was hilariously distracted by his suggestion, I talked to Jer about it, and he was like, well, like, maybe it's worth looking into. And so we started with, like everybody else, taking some online quizzes, and I would do the quiz and be like, no, you're fine. And then Jared was like, why don't I take the quiz as if I'm you? Because I feel like I'm going to be more honest in the answers. And then it was 10 out of 10, 10 out of 10, 10 out of 10, every quiz. And I was like, okay, like I'm going to talk to my doctor. And then I went through the process like you of getting diagnosed. But I don't think I really understood it, because for me, ADHD was that kid standing on his desk in an elementary school drinking glue to get people's attention. You focus on the hyperactivity. Yeah. And that's when I saw a thing about executive dysfunction, and I was like, well, wait a sec, this makes sense. Like, this is, like, I always say ADHD is the worst named disorder, because the hyperactivity, it misdirects people. Because I
gotta interrupt you, man. Sleeping sickness is the worst named disorder, because really anything to do with it.
Okay, I'll give you that. I'll give you that. All right. I meant more, it's the word ADHD is the worst name for ADHD. But then when I started to read about executive dysfunction, and that's when I was like, oh, okay, like this is relatable content. And so it was really weird, because now Bruce McCullough's like, I saved your life, son. And I was like, yeah, but you also got my development deal canceled, so settle the fuck down.
So you had terminal ADHD.
Yeah. But it's just like, I find the whole thing fascinating, because I go, okay, like, what would my life have been had I gotten there? I think I would probably have a regular job. I think I would be. So I'm so fucking grateful that I didn't get diagnosed earlier, because I've got a pretty good gig.
Well, it's kind of interesting, because there's this idea in psychology that our behavior and our sort of attributes and our sort of qualities will seek out environments that those are favorable in, to a certain degree. And so you do find, I think in comedy, ADHD is highly overrepresented from the general public because of the stimulus. So we need extra stimulus to focus our attention. So that's basically what that sort of adrenal ability is it's allowed to sort of keep our working memory engaged strong enough that we have enough extra energy to direct our attention and focus it to a certain degree. And so emergencies. We love emergencies. We love,
dopamine fucking right into my veins.
Well, I think you're going to get corrected on the dopamine, but but I get what you're saying. Yeah. But emergency room doctors, emergency room nurses, paramedics, comedians, the really high representation.
All heroes.
Yeah. But we're not good for that. Sit in the office for 8 hours and do the the other part. That's difficult. That could be a structural issue that is part of our modern society that sort of makes this a bigger problem than it has to be, because we've constructed a society where we are behaving in something that isn't necessarily what our evolutionary, our software, and our hardware has evolved for over the last 50,000 years. And in the last 150 years, we're being like thrown in this environment. We never sat in a chair in front of a screen for 8 hours and focused. That's never, at no point in our history was there, or were we ever like that. We always had some sort of engagement and sort of cyclical stimuli all day. So hearing a threat from a predator, or reacting to, battle or whatever, those were very useful.
Yeah.
I always say it's like the people that could focus back, in the Viking days, they were the liability because they didn't notice the invasion coming in. Whereas I was like, I'm ready for it. Come on, let's go.
Let's go. It is a weird thing, like the rush we get from that. But I also think there's a, like most of my friends are on the spectrum because I think we're drawn to each other because we connect in a way that neurotypicals just don't vibe with, Jared and I can always tell when we walk into a gathering of people within 5 minutes, we've found our people, and it's usually sitting in the corner talking shit about everybody else.
It's either that or I find the pet.
Yeah. Okay. Fair. Yeah. Okay. I need to go back though, because I'm like circulating about your comment about dopamine. What did you mean by that?
Well, dopamine's involved in an integrative process of us learning. So the learning is vital to our sort of ability to direct our focus, learn about new stimuli, become sort of accustomed to things. I'll get the professor to explain this a little better because but the adrenaline or norepinephrine, if it's outside of the brain, norepinephrine in the brain, adrenaline outside the brain. Sorry. It's used for our sort of working memory and our short-term memory and our executive function. So it keeps, let's say, the connectome that represents our immediate working memory. So the theory is we have two forms of working memory that we access. One is a visual spatial, and one's the auditory. And they work together as well, then they integrate together, but you need that sort of stimulus to keep that sort of directed attention. So directed attention is what, whereas that's exogenous. So our attention is drawn to it. We have no choice. I hope that didn't fuck my speakers. But directed attention is that ability to sort of also control our thoughts, control what we're going to. And that involves sort of the integration of working memory and our sort of executive function together. And that's why the adrenal stimulation of, I believe it's the A2 receptors. Again, I know that my professor who taught me this is going to come down. That's part of the thing. So stimuli, we can incorporate external sort of reward stimulus. High levels of reward outside allow us to sort of, in a way, focus. And that's why stand up. I mean, you're in vigilant mode the entire time, vigilance. But that uses a tremendous amount of energy too. And I find that's kind of to be on edge all the time, because I have anxiety a little bit too, not terrible, but like, but I find the anxiety is another way of me kind of keeping myself focused. Yep. I work with that stress. I use it to sort of direct my things as well.
We talked about it a lot in our tour, because I actually, I quietly quit stand up after my diagnosis, because I was like, it kind of was a snowball. I had lost one of my best friends after a long battle with cancer. And one of the things that I had learned through her, her life being cut short, is I had spent, 15 years saying goodbye every weekend to follow this dream that I thought I had, when the dream was what I was leaving. And that was Jer and Grace. And I was like, I think I want to spend some time working on me, figuring out, is this what I want from life? But also, I didn't realize what the adrenaline of performing was doing to me, and what it was, my anxiety, my stage fright, my, you were, I think you were there when, it was the Moncton Comedy Festival. I've talked about this before. I won't name them because I don't fucking care enough about them to say their name, but you know how I always had my notebook on stage with me?
Oh, I know exactly what you're going to tell me. I remember because that bothered me. Yeah.
Well, I think you and I were both enraged as I was walking out on
tips, I believe.
Yeah. Oh, tips. But as I was walking out to do a gala in front of 900 people, he ripped the notebook out of my hand. And I was like, this is pre-diagnosis. I did not realize that I actually need the notes, because it helps me focus. It helps me deliver so one of the things was, I was realizing the anxiety and the adrenaline they were competing with each other all the time. And I would get off stage and I would be dead inside, I would just be, there's nothing left. And so when I said to Jared, I was like, I want to take some time off. I want to experience life. I want to find peace. And kind of strip myself of ego, I really wanted to just be like, what do I want from life? And Jer still to this day credits that time off with our success because it removed my bravado. Like we just had this documentary come out on Crave, and in the process of having it made, we had to go through all these old clips of my stand-up. And I had never noticed how different my voice was on stage from when I'm just off stage talking. Like it was a character. It was very much like a lot of people are surprised to find, like a poor man's Richard Lett, which I think is Richard Lett. But
yeah,
the point is like the bravado was actually holding me back. It was a protector for myself, especially as a gay comedian. 20 years ago, I was coming out on, yeah, don't worry. I've been using it for clout for a while, but now I'm a boring white middle-aged gay man. It doesn't mean shit anymore.
Adorable.
But it's one of these things where, like, when we decided to do this tour, I said to Jaros, like, we have to protect our mental health first. And you don't know how hard touring is going to be. I don't know how hard it's going to be because we've never done it at this level, like where we're flying to a new city every day, and it's the pressure of making sure that every seat is sold and people are getting their money's worth. But one of the things we did was decided to use cue cards because it was helpful for me. And I just said to the audience, it was like, listen, if you don't think this is professional, I've been told that for 20 fucking years, and I don't care because I found something that works for my brain and I'm going to use it. So if you find a workaround, use it and stop giving a shit what neurotypical people think.
Yeah. I if I can, I feel you completely. I agree 100%. And I think it's really interesting how that stuck in your head, that experience so much, because it's traumatic, but B, it's like, there's a lack of empathy that is consistent in the character and consistent in that moment that where you're like, I don't want to be like this, and I want to show a different way. And I've always felt that with those same interactions. But you've always had more empathy and more understanding and more grounding than me, and that's been a long journey for me. That's been another one of my very slow learn arcs. But
for sure.
It did take understanding the ADHD. It's like when we're looking back at the things that we might have missed career-wise, and there's my God, development deals that I'm the king of fucking up development deals. I like four in a row where I just beep, beep, beep. But my bigger regret, and you'll probably understand this because you've known me for a long time, is the way I treated people, the way it was interpreted versus what I kind of meant. And I didn't understand why I was so misinterpreted all the time, because I do this thing where I would joke with people like they were my long-term friends when I just met them.
Yeah.
And I never understood why that was a problem. And it was a huge problem.
It's a really beautiful thing though, that you can sit there today and know that your empathy, at the time, your lack of empathy prevented you from understanding. But I will say a lot of those times they were really,
I'm
the same dude. I look back at some of the things I've said to people about their, like, especially their body. Like, I don't think, because I was already so self-deprecating about my own body that I thought, oh, it's open season on anybody. Yeah. And then I go, wait, I'm self-deprecating because of the shits people said to me when I was 6, because of the shit people said to me when I was 11. I was like, this isn't fair, because there's somebody out there going, I feel this way about my body because of something Darcy said to me when he was 25, like that. I feel that guilt. I feel that remorse. And
I feel terrible about one of those in particular. I thought I just joked the way I thought we joked as comics, but I didn't realize that sensitivity. And there's so many of them in my head. It's like, but a lot of that too is that impulse control, where I thought I was always trying to keep that level high of us, because we had a high level of laughing all the time.
Yeah,
like we were always pushing the boundaries, but it's not. Yeah, it was stupid. And to be honest, I can't blame it all on the ADHD. There's a part of my lack of emotional maturity at the time. It took me a long time of living with somebody and caring deeply about somebody else to educate me about that. And that's kind of my wife changed a lot of that, even though she's crueler than I could ever be.
She's pretty mean. She's pretty mean in the best possible way.
She was asking so much about Jared before this. She's like, "Oh, was Jared okay?" It's like, and it's like, "Yeah, I'm sure he's fine." She's like, "Oh, well, because I'm very close to Jared. You know that." I'm like, "Well, why are you so close to Jared?" She goes, "Because us husbands used to hang out together." Well, I'm like,
it's true. It's true. He even said, he was like, "Is Courtney on the podcast?" I was like, "No." He's like, "Okay, then I will take it off.
Then I'm totally sick."
Yeah. No, I think, like I just to circle back to that, like I can see the guilt when you're telling me this story, but the guilt should be if you were telling me the story without the closing the circle. Like, hey, I said this to so and so.
Yeah.
And that's it. Well, whereas you're now saying it, hey, I said this to so-and-so and I shouldn't have. And that's where you can say to yourself, okay, the forgiveness is there. I'm allowed to have that. You can't take it back, but holding it isn't doing you any favors.
I got to credit therapy. Like I've been, my psychiatrist died, unfortunately, in the middle of COVID. Him and his wife both died from COVID. And it was like,
from COVID?
Yeah, within 3 months of each other. And it was it threw my life into disarray because it was the middle of university. He's the guy that talked me into going back to, because I wanted to, but I was scared. And through his medication help and guidance,
that's great.
I found the courage to kind of do it, because he realized it was something I wanted to do more than anything else.
Yeah.
Which is really weird amazing. For a 45-year-old to want at the peak of his career. After the same year I had like my Netflix special came out. I'd headline Massey Hall on New Year's, like, and then I'm going to stop all this and go to school and learn psychology and neuroscience. It's just
a beautiful thing.
Ridiculous career-wise, very satisfying in other senses, but when he passed away, I was left with this void, so I started going to psychotherapy, which is more sort of like a more sort of engaging psychoeducative process. And I started engaging more in sort of that deeper emotional sort of the traumas, the effects of the ADHD and stuff like that. And you become aware of things, and it's hard because you become dually aware. Like, you start going back and thinking through other people's eyes some of the things you did. And you feel bad about, like, sort of, everybody hurts and is vulnerable, and you can't be perfect. You can't, and that's the other thing you got to remember. You can't regret everything. So there's this balance between, like, forgiveness, but also going, there's a modicum of risk in society that we have to find that sort of resilient middle ground with. And everything's got nuance, but it's a slow process of move forward.
It's an interesting thing. Like, that's the thing, is like, sometimes you can't forgive yourself until you're put in the same situation and you react,
Oh, that's good.
Where I always say, like, I had a really good friendship, a really strong friendship that I ruined because of rejection sensitivity dysphoria. And, but I kind of realized, looking back at it, of how bad it got, and how both of us, that when I met a new friend during COVID and I started seeing the red flags in my brain, being like, oh wait, I'm doing this again. And then I was able to, like, step back and literally write out the boundaries that I was going to put on myself for this friendship. And now it's almost like, some otherworldly thing was happening to be like, let's test him. Let's see if he can do it right this time. And I feel really good about it. And I feel like I have a version, obviously, like the old friend and I we can't get to where we should have been. But this new friend, I've been able to do that with. And my existing friendships have gotten better because of it as well. But it was one of those things where, until I met this new friend, I truly hadn't been able to forgive myself. And then through that process, I was like, okay, like, you fucked up, but you found the tools, you implemented them, and you're a better person because of it. So that's literally all you can do when you fuck up, is just try to not, repeat it. And so it's those little things that that help me get past the bullshit, to get past the history. Because you can just sit and wallow in your fuck ups all the time. Like it can be all consuming, and you have to remind yourself. And luckily, I have object permanence as well, so I forget a lot of the time about the things and the people. Like like Jer and I, in Jer's office is pictures of all our friends and family, so I remember they exist. Because sometimes I'll be like, yeah, fuck, I haven't talked to so and so in 6 months. Like, I hope they don't hate me, but it's just because I forgot they existed. It doesn't mean I love them any less.
I have friends like that too. Like basically the only good friends I have left are the ones that understand that I'm not gonna call every year.
Yeah.
And I've got friends from like back in LA. Like I just reconnected with a dear friend of mine, Colleen. But we used to talk like every couple of years, and then we didn't for like 5 years, and then people learn about our difficulties with that as well. And it's but I want to kind of just go to like you have such, and I don't like fawning because I don't think it's necessary, but you do have like a real self-awareness. You look inside a lot, and
a lot more now. Yeah.
And it's kind of remarkably soothing. It's remarkably, and I think this is kind of like, I don't want to diagnose the specific qualia that makes you guys sort of work so well, but there is sort of like a genuine sort of emotional observation of self that you sort of generalize outward in an empathetic but happy way. Like you joke about it. And this is kind of the magic I see in you, is that you make it funny and you make it joyful. And I think that's kind of interesting how you use comedy to cope and to develop and to teach. And is that conscious to be funny?
It is
all the time?
It's more, I will say, I think I'm way less funny in real life than I've ever been, because of, to be funny. But, like I look at, and I don't want to get too deep into it, but I look at the state of, successful Netflix comics, and it's so rage based that, and I was just like, I don't want that. There's a reason that people, our daughter watches Friends and Gilmore Girls and The Office. Those are her 3 favorite shows. And depending on the time of year, we know what she's watching. In the fall, she's watching Gilmore Girls. In the spring, she's watching The Office. And in the summer, she's watching Friends. It's just her seasons, but there's a comfort in the comedy there for her. And that's when I realized that comfort comedy is what I enjoy. And so I don't, I have strong opinions about politics. I have strong opinions about trans rights, but I also just want everybody in the room to feel good when they leave the room. So my what I feel is my job as a comedian and as a content creator is that when you come across our content, you're going to smile and maybe learn something, maybe not, but you're going to at least enjoy your time there. I can't remember who said it. It's a famous quote, but you're not always going to remember what somebody said to you, but you're always going to remember how they made you feel.
I think that was the 7 Secrets of Highly Successful People, that original writing. I forget the guy's name, but he wrote a series of books, and it's an incredibly, that's
very poignant.
I never knew that's a late in life learner for me too. I don't think I heard that until I was like 40, and I started thinking about how I made people feel. And it wasn't great because I don't remember their names. I don't remember their faces. I don't remember them.
And that's a tricky one because I'm real bad at faces and names out of context. If I met you at a comedy club and I see you at a comedy club, probably remember. If I met you at a comedy club and I see you at an airport, I don't know who you are. But I think it was just like, what is my impact? How am I impacting people? And I want people to feel good. So I just try to, Jared and I really look at, I did this bit early on in TikTok that I'm not proud of the joke, but I sort of am. And it was just me taking a rip off cam from the bong and being like, I don't know why this is called Stephen Hawking Kush. And then I stood up and fell over.
Oh, okay.
And it's a very hacky kind of bit, but I posted it, and like the first 3 comments were from disabled people. And I was like, oh, fuck me. That's a terrible, like, this was not my intent, but intent doesn't matter when it comes to, so I took it down right away. And I was just like, oh, I can do this I can talk about my experience. That's it. And so that's what I try to focus on.
I've always tried to do my comedy from my unique engagement sort of thing. Even like I taught comedy once, like about 15 years ago for a weekend, and some people really liked it, but some people like, this doesn't help me write jokes. But all I would say is that you have to sort of integrate your own perspective into things so that people can relate to your experience through a narrative that you're sharing clearly and communicatively. And I think that's really important. And I've seen that in people that steal jokes, where they'll steal jokes from comics that the narrative of the joke works specifically for their experience and their arc. And then when they do it from their character, which is generally a very ego-centric sort of culture, it looks terrible on them, or it comes out contextually wrong. But that you did engage in something that does make me think about comedy a lot and think about what a joke like that. Now, I am incredibly empathetic to the other sides of things. Now, and I think I put a lot of thought into that now. But I couldn't put thought into those things before I was aware of the other side of things. And I think a lot of the times we hold people to pretty strong levels that they're omniscient in their universal perspective of how other things can hurt others or be experienced in a negative way. And that's part of privilege. That's part of our cultural sort of lane. But I do also think it's important and you can't put this on anybody else, but comedy can be useful in learning to laugh at yourself and your obstacles. And one of the things I've noticed particularly about differently abled people, especially there's a lot in comedy, like that people that have different sort of disability, or not, I don't like calling them disabilities, but different abilities, where they're performing and they sort of can express their own self perspective that shows how they have dealt with the externalization. But I find what is weird is that third party that isn't in that situation acting on behalf. And I find this a particularly Canadian quandary, because we want to be good people and we want to be empathetic. But if the person can speak for their own, and if they're enjoying it, you don't have to then defend. Everybody has their own sort of nuanced, complicated individual circumstance. And, I don't think that the intent of most comics is negative. I think it's more blind, or it's privileged.
For sure. I think privileged is usually, especially, like with the, like the Chappelles and the Ellen DeGeneres and the specials and stuff. It's like, you're not relatable. You're just telling us what you think the world should be. And it's
Tell me you watched the Ellen special.
I couldn't get through it.
I did. I watched the entire thing.
I couldn't do it.
Did you watch it? Deaf, wasn't it?
It was so out of touch.
I felt for her. I know this is crazy, but I felt bad for her because I know what a great comic she was.
Yeah.
Like I thought that
it was bitter.
Yeah, it must hurt a little bit though. Like she's going to look back at this 2 years later and kind of feel bad, I think.
Yeah, she can sit on her $20 million she got for it.
Sorry, I cut you off. I didn't mean to. I apologize.
No, I was going to say, have you watched Anthony Jeselnik's new special?
And this is how out of comedy I am. I just heard his name from that thing the other day.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I didn't know. I didn't. It's funny because I used to be very good friends with Ari and I was on Joe Rogan. I knew those guys, but then I kind of lost contact with them like 7-8 years ago, and I don't listen to any podcast, which is terrible for me to be doing one. but I've never listened to a comedy podcast other than Graham Clark's. That's the only one I used to listen to. Stop podcasting yourself.
Still one of the best.
Yeah, because I found him joyful and comfortable, even though I always hated mine because I was tonally, perpendicular to their thing. Like, why am I on this show? I don't belong here.
That's funny. It's funny because Anthony is the anti-hero of those guys because he really does speak so eloquently. But I'm talking, we're going back 16, 17 years. I got a call from Guy McPherson, may he rest in peace. And he was like, hey, can you hook me up with some weed? And I was like, yeah, sure. And he's like, I'm at the River Rock, come hang out. And so I go, and Guy McPherson was really good friends with Sarah Silverman. And I go and meet him and Sarah and her opener, Anthony Jeselnik, in this hotel room. And the three of us, Guy didn't smoke, just sat and smoked weed and bullshitted for the night. And it was great fun. And so I've always been like, just following his career because I love the misdirect. He's brilliant at misdirect comedy, and it's very edgy, and he talks about anything and everything. But I feel like this new special.
Oh my God, I confused him with that Hinchcliffe guy.
Oh,
I just realized that. This is why I don't belong doing commentary anymore. I completely confused the two. I read the article that he had in Vulture magazine just recently.
Oh yeah.
And I thought it was actually
great.
really, really smart. Jesseling's quite brilliant. He's the one that sort of talked about context and the importance. The difference between talking about something is the communicative of the funny and the power of the funny. You know you're not doing, and this is something I don't want to Bill Maher this moment and go, I thought of this years ago, but I think a lot of comics have said this. It's like, if you can talk about anything, if you make it funny and everybody laughs at it.
Yeah, Daniel Sloss, his last special is all about you can talk about it if you're fucking smart enough. Yeah, and here you go. Anyways, oddly enough, I also spent a night smoking weed with Tony Hinchcliffe in a hotel room in Toronto, thinking he was gay, and he isn't. I don't know. I don't like to think that people that are in the closet are gay like that. A lot of people think I'm gay, and I don't think it matters because I'm like, I've never denied myself any sexual pleasure. There
Let's
you
put
go.
it that way.
Yeah. That's the thing.
I don't like labels and stuff like that. So, but his journey in that sense is whatever his journey is. God bless him. But
For sure.
I don't like some of the what I've heard, like about the sort of the overwhelming control. But again, I don't know the person's philosophy. I don't know their intent. I can't know their shoes. I just see you just see the outcomes where it's like a Markov blanket where we sort of have to read the truth out of the secondary inputs. Everybody in the out there in podcast land is looking for that Markov chain blanket statistical reference, and I think I finally delivered one. That's for all the AI techs out there. But yeah, there's a responsibility and a weirdness that I try not to overburden myself with avoiding anything, but I do try to make sure that when I deliver a joke on something that's pushing a boundary, that it's fully fleshed out and has a positive outcome message. And that's something I've really been trying to do for the last 10 years is always have a positive thing about either self-esteem, forgiveness, tolerance, loving. Like I think there's room under the tent for everybody, but everybody has to do a little bit of we have to tolerate things that make us uncomfortable to a degree. Yeah. But if you're traumatized, and this is why I love trigger warnings. So many people get upset over trigger warnings. I think trigger warnings are wonderful. And
I don't see the problem with it.
But some of the people that are on, I don't want to say what side.
Yeah.
Right. They think trigger warnings are bad and stuff like that. And I get what they're saying, because the problem with trigger warnings, as I see it, they're not being used properly. A trigger warning shouldn't mean that you can't talk about something. Trigger warning should allow people to go, am I ready for this, or should I take myself out of this stimulus? And what happens a lot of times is people don't take them out of the stimulus, and then they push back against it being said at all. Yeah. And that's kind of,
the snake's eating its tail a lot of the time on both sides.
Yes, absolutely.
I have this thing where, like if I'm going through something and I need to vent to a friend, I will text them and go, do you have the space for me to just rage for a minute? And
like
sometimes they don't. And that's like, and it's the same thing with trigger warnings. It's like, hey, I'm going to talk about sexual assault. Do you have the space? That's all you're asking. And if you don't have the space, walk over there or turn this off, but if you have the space, let me go through this conversation with you. And so I don't see the problem with it, but I see your point being, I don't have the space, so no one should have the space. And that's where the problem is. It's like, no, just remove yourself. That's it. Just there you go. Bye-bye.
It's the baby crying in church scenario. I don't know if you were raised religious, but and I'm not religious at all, by the way, but when I was raised, I was I went to church every weekend. And there used to be this little soundproof room at the back of the church if your baby started crying, and people would go and sit in the soundproof room so it wouldn't upset everybody else. And
hilarious.
I was talking with a priest, not because of any reason other than he was at a comedy show because he was the brother of a comic. And I was like, have you noticed any changes? He goes, one of the big changes I've noticed is people don't take their babies crying out of the church anymore.
Really?
Yeah, they just cry. And then we've discussed it with them, and I discussed it with one parishioner, and they got really upset about it. And they said, it's like, I thought about this sort of perspective and how there has been a societal shift toward the individual perspective, circumventing the collective perspective.
Absolutely. I always point to merging in America. You can tell you've crossed the border when you merge onto a highway, because it is very much get the fuck out of my way. I'm merging, and all the other cars. Whereas in Canada, like, you see this, like above a merge lane, drivers, go ahead. But I'm not saying it specifically for Americans, but there's a selfishness that has come with modern society, with capitalism, with the internet, has changed us. I
would push back against that a little bit with the selfishness, though, if you don't mind.
Go for it.
I think it's people are kind of overburdened cognitively because people have to be more vigilant. And I think that one of the problems with our modern societies, and one of the narratives that's sort of being emboldened by people pushing us to the left and the right and making us fearful of each other, is that when you become afraid, you lack trust. And when the systems of making things fair for everybody break down, and that trust disappears too. And when there's not trust, we have to be vigilant constantly. And when we're vigilant constantly, we don't have that extra mental resource to sort of like, you know what, I can relax because I'm being looked out for by my friends, by my society, by my community, by the laws.
I think that's a very fair point. I think even just looking at the latest election results speaks to that, because, there was a very big campaign on the left for social issues, and people were like, I can't buy milk, and therefore I don't have time to care about this other person's problem because I need to feed myself and my children. And I feel like, that was a big misstep on the Democratic side, to not really be clued into what you just said, that people are just trying to fucking survive.
And I think that there's room in those the old saying, I think you've heard it, all politics is local. That's kind of what it means in a way.
Mm-hmm.
And those social issues are part of that. Those social issues, if they're integrated locally, if we look at sort of like, you can talk to people face to face, you can humanize, you can dehumanize when you're talking about national stuff. And we're engaged so much in national ideas when we should be engaged in local ideas, because local ideas is where real change takes place, where real tolerance is sort of put to applied use, where real sort of understanding and hearing disparate points of view. But we're all engaged in this high level concept that actually affects maybe 3% of our lives, where 97% of what's happening is in our communities. And if we get involved and get to know people and, realize we can talk to right wingers, realize we can talk to far left wingers, realize that we can coexist with different ideas and not like go to war like they project in these national sort of extremist perspectives. But,
that's
this is no longer funny. I'm sorry.
I don't know if it's ever been funny.
Man, I've already told everybody this is a successful podcast.
Sometimes just getting a podcast guest is success.
This is just good exercise for me to focus and do stuff. Like
Right.
I as somebody with ADHD too, I don't like handing off. I learn. I become obsessed with learning. So every level of everything, I want to learn every nuance, and I'm not good at it, even though I want to learn.
My question to you is what tools are you putting into place that you don't get bored of doing this podcast when the hyperfixation wears off? Because I did one for a year, and then I was just like, I'm out. I can't do it. And it was successful. Like, we were getting big listens, and I was just like, man, it's just not what I want to do.
Well, one of the things I'm doing is I'm making the series arc have a terminus. So I'm trying to set a midterm goal, and so fuck you for asking me a good question that's based specifically as a colossal flaw of mine.
Mine. That's why I asked.
No, thank you. I need this pushback, and I appreciate it. So I'm doing the first season, which is an integration of the ideas of comedy and neuroscience together. So this is I have 10 episodes sort of planned out that address different topics as we go. And that way, me and the professor can sort of go through these 10 sort of ideas where comedy intersects with things like intelligence, coping, resilience, social sort of mediation, sexual selection and relationships and romance, and different sort of integrative ideas, and sort of explore them from a neuroscience, psychology, cognitive science perspective. So that gives me sort of a bookend of a goal that's midterm that it's not an endless thing. But then I was going to go every season, sort of look at different things. I was thinking of the second season talking about the lifelong learning and why education late in life, I think, is a benefit to sort of like stopping extremist sort of ideas, having that pushback. Because one of my jokes in my show now is I talk about how, conspiracy theories is this generation's Vietnam. Because you lose like a friend a week to conspiracy theories.
That's great.
And, the sad part is that a lot of the reason that happens is because you've got some really intelligent people that aren't getting sort of intellectual pushback. They're not being sort of shown how best evidence works and how validity of truth evolves over step after step after step through a community of testing and peers, and that there is more to it than just this scientist says this.
Well, and because we also, critical thinking has left the chat.
Yeah.
Like we also, like it's something we've talked a lot about on our tour is, as much as the algorithm has benefited our lives, it has also ruined our society. And we are being put into these echo chambers on every platform, echo chambers that are set up by who? We don't fucking know. But we know that since Facebook and Instagram have become the main source of communication in the world, we've seen shock election results everywhere around the world. We've seen extremism rising up. In Canada, you still cannot share actual news on Facebook, but you can share lies. And it's so fucked up. One of the things that just blows I hate feeding that part of our job. And I can't wait till the day that social media leaves us. I can't wait. And I don't know what it'll mean for my career, but I don't fucking care. I'll find a way. That's why I said to Jer when we were doing the first live show, I feel like we need to shift back into live and in-person stuff because we are starved for truth, and nothing is more real than being in a room with performers. And that's why when we did the one show, I was like, let's try this, let's tour this, because I feel like in 5 years from now, it will be the only way people find truth in performance.
I love that. Yeah, I agree completely. I see every time they tweak the algorithms on the different things, and I started reading about I think in June, Instagram changed their to highlight reels to follow the TikTok theme. But one of the things they started doing was they used to do a scalular. They show 10% of your followers, and then if it did well, they'd show it to the next 10%, to the next 10%. Yeah. So then they switched with the new one to showing it to mainly not your followers.
Yeah.
And if it got no traction, then it would only show it to like 3%. And so everybody's sort of views dropped. But what this does, though, is if you're a niche deliverer like yourself, or like if I'm trying to just find a cognitive science sort of thing, which people might have followed me for, they're not getting that. And then I have to start appealing to a broad spectrum base to get like people. So I got to like fall down the stairs and go, and then cognitive science.
Exactly. Well, it's like we have people that only follow us for our plant content, and they only see that content. People that only follow for ADHD, people that only follow. We had a lady stop us the other day that was like, "Oh, I love all your stand-up clips. Do you guys ever post anything beyond that?" And it's like, we maybe post one stand-up clip a month, lady. Like, that's how fucking, like, even within my own content, it is echo chamber. And like, we have to look at it going, oh, we haven't posted a plant video in a month. We should probably keep that in mind next time I'm gardening or something. It's a really bizarre thing, because like I always say I would give all of them. I'd give you $1,000 a month to just show my content to my followers. I don't care. Like, I don't care about growing anymore. You know, like, just give the 7 million people that follow us already. Just show them what we're posting.
You have 7 million people following you?
Yeah, something like I stopped counting, but it's 7 or 8 million.
Hey, can I ask you a question? When did you know? When did you know it was blowing up?
Or the first TikTok video. I'm not kidding. The first TikTok. Here's this. I'm going to give you the Reader's Digest version. I started a TikTok channel for Yuma, our puppy, because I was like, I'm just going to post dumb puppy videos. And she went viral, and all of a sudden she had like 100,000 followers. And I was like, I've done this for 20 years and my dog is more successful. I had 900 followers on Instagram. So I started what is now the Darcy and Jer channel, and I posted one clip from my Crave special about being a gay dad, and stopped checking it because I was just like, yeah, whatever, it'll do what it does. And then a few days later, I went back and it had 6 million views, and I had like 150,000 followers, and I was like, oh. And then the next clip hit, and the next clip, and I said to Jer, we still remember it because it was December 19th, 2019. I said, this is different. Our 5-year anniversary is coming up. And I said to him, I was like, something's like, I've found something. I'm doing something that 20 years of being on CBC and CTV didn't do, and that is reach my audience.
CBC didn't reach your audience?
CBC didn't reach an audience.
Remember what Brett used to call them? A network controlled by 9-year-olds with 70-year-olds pitching 80-year-olds what 60-year-olds are watching.
Brilliant. It's so true. But it was one of those things where I kind of knew, but then, you know, like we were early in, like we were already having a following before COVID. And then COVID was when when I said to Jared, has to be joyful, because we're so scared right now. Like, the world is scared. And that's when it was April 2020 when we hit 400,000 followers. And then, and the whole time we were doing this, like, we were putting up these stupid videos, but nothing on Instagram, nothing on Facebook. We didn't want any of our friends to know. Nobody knew we were on this app other than friends that were already on it. And then when we hit 1 million followers, I got the Busy Donkey tattoo, which is Busy Donkey is just like a stim song that I sing that people really connected with. And that's when I was like, this is a different world. And we started getting brand offers, and, you know, like we flew to South by Southwest so Lizzo could teach us to twerk in a video. And like, it was just like weird shit started happening, and we were like, okay, like, let's just ride this out. But then we really ignored other social media for too long, and so we were like, okay, we'll start posting on Instagram and become that cringe couple that posts videos and stuff. But when Jer quit his job, it'll be 3 years on the 19th. So he gave his corporate job notice 2 years after that conversation, when I said to him, this is going to be different. He specifically was like, that's the day I'm going to quit my job. And that'll be, it'll be 3 years since, like, he had a good job. Jer was making 6 figures. We were set for life. Like, I didn't have to work and we were going to be okay. But we both were just like, well, what is the point of this? Like, if we want to wait until we're 60 to travel together because you only get 3 weeks a year, like that's not living, that's waiting to live. And so now, like between that and moving off the mainland and just like prioritizing our health and mental wellness, it's just been like, it's been a fucking dream. We're like, there's constant stress. We're constantly worried it'll go away tomorrow. And if it does, it does. Like the thing I've learned through this whole thing, and I don't want to wax too poetic, but and I've quoted this so many times over the years, there's a great movie with Sean Connery, Angelina Jolie, Ryan Felipe called Playing by Heart. And in that movie, Sean Connery's wife is mad at him about an affair he had 30 years ago. And he just has this line that is stuck with me, especially in this process because he never had sex with this woman, but it was an emotional affair. And he's like, you don't understand. I had to fall in love with myself through her eyes again. I needed that. And without sounding too grandiose, Jer and I fell in love with our relationship again because of the eyes of the audience. It made us realize, wow, we really do have something special here. And I don't like to seek external validation, even though it's my entire existence, but it really helped us realize this is all gravy, but we've already got so we've always said to each other, the second this job, this existence of negatively affects our relationship, then every channel gets deleted. Like we'll just walk away because that's just the bonus to what I already have. You know what I mean? Does that make?
I love it. I think, I didn't expect such a personal sort of, sort of summation of it, but it's sweet. And it's kind of, that's kind of your brand right there. Like turning something tacky.
Yeah,
I know, but I think of the 15 years ago, Darcy going, yeah, that's good. I deserve it.
Yeah. It's true. I feel like I've changed a lot in a good way.
And it's wonderful. And change is such a good thing. And you're a fucking great example of that change and introspection and growing. And that this is a neat thing in actual psychology. If you believe you can change, you can change. If you don't believe you can change, you can't change. And that also impacts, and it impacts how you treat other people. Because if you don't believe you can change, you don't think other people can change.
Yeah.
And that makes you more rigid and less tolerant.
Less tolerant is I see it all the time in people. And I see it even, I have to catch myself where it's like, oh, okay, this is a problem. But it's a problem I can find a solution to that I'm, it's just not repeating.
You're a sweetheart. You're a fucking sweetheart. And when I knew you made successful, I wasn't on internet on social media for most of my schooling, but Courtney was at work one day and one of her coworkers comes up and started showing her videos of these two guys that she fucking loved, and she's got to see them, and it was you. And Courtney goes, I know, these are my friends. And she's like, no, they're not.
That's the surreal one that when friends are like, man, like it was Grace had the same experience. Someone was singing Busy Donkey to their friend that Grace was on the bus riding. And she's like, I'm on a bus right now. And someone is singing the song that you sang to me when I was 6. And I was like, oh, that's surreal. Like, that's fucking weird. It's a weird world.
I'm so happy for you. And it's nice to see that you popped on this camera and you weren't doing like lines of blow and
the bong is over my corner, but it's not 4:00 yet.
Like I said with the weed, you asked me earlier, I never finished, but during school, I never did weed during the semesters, but I would smoke nonstop in the break till the next semester. And then, and that was like my reward mechanism. And when I graduated in June, I took the entire summer and smoked weed for like July through August. And it kind of got out of my system. And then I stopped in September. And then Courtney's going through exams because she's got another year at U of T. And
is she at U of T as well?
Yeah, both of us are.
Good for you guys. You must be so broke.
I got to be honest with you. This is the first year I've kind of noticed that I'm not wealthy.
Don't let it define you, buddy.
I had some freedom going into this, and I kind of spent a lot of my capital on getting on doing this late in life. But I ultimately it's worth it, and I feel like engaging with the world with a deeper understanding of things just gives you more freedom, gives you a better understanding, makes you less stressed about sort of how things work and what to actually be sort of adjusting yourself to and what not to. I can't speak enough about, if you want to go to school, go to school. It's really great.
Yeah. I think it's great. I think I've said it to you privately, but like, congratulations again. I'm really proud that you did it, because it's a tough thing. You walked from the peak to do what you've always needed to do. I strongly, but to not only for yourself, but for, for moving forward. I think it's only going to make you a better comedian and a better person.
I
fucking hope.
Right? I couldn't have been a worse person. It is kind of crazy, though, that education, I do feel, or at least some form of education in a structured environment, it's not just the classes that you learn from, but the fact that, so I did this year of preparatory before the full-on university, which helps you sort of adjust and get your skill level up to a competitive university. And there was people from all over the world in it. Like the U of T was doing this program, bringing sort of Somali refugees and Sudanese refugees, these women that were in camps in Kenya, and flying them over with a scholarship so that they could be at school and learn and get an education. And they were in my class. And then there's Syrian refugees that had come over and had a degree in biochemistry and stuff like that, but their degrees weren't recognized here, so they had to go to school again. And then you had people that had ADHD like myself, had late-term diagnosis, and you had this spectrum, just a spectrum of various different experiences in life, and in these sort of classes, and that was a huge learning for me. Seeing,
I didn't understand that. I was just going to interrupt you to be like, that's a subject that you need to talk about more for people, because I didn't understand that that's a thing you can do before going back to university, is to prepare for it in that sense.
Well, that was the only way to get in. I dropped out of high school, and most people don't realize that. And this is what used to make my psychiatrist laugh. I had 3 months to go. I was doing fine in all my classes, and I decided to drop out to become a stand-up. And I know, and my psychiatrist, and nobody said you had ADHD, huh? Nobody even thought about it.
Nobody suggested it. Yes.
But yeah, so I didn't even have a high school graduation. I eventually got my GED down in Los Angeles. I went and took a test one afternoon. But going back to school, to get in, I had to do a year and get I had to pass an A to get full-time, and B+ to do part-time. I got like a 90 something. So I got in to the A Pro. Don't mean to brag, but I found out I'm a pretty good student. But yeah, so they have to know that you're not wasting your money, and that they're letting you in prepared, because they can't let you into, and also they generally, it wasn't for sciences, this program, but I did all the math and sciences because I went into a science route, which you're not, at that time, nobody did. Now you're allowed to do that, but you have to take prep science things. So I had to do all that on myself. I had to learn calculus, algebra, on my own, which was a lot of work.
Yeah, good for you for doing it, though. Holy shit.
I really love it. Thank you, and I appreciate your compliment. That's something I have to learn to do a bit better.
Yeah, you did brush it off, and I was like, oh, he'll get there one day.
I'm sorry.
You're going to take him. No, don't be. Oh my gosh. Don't apologize for not. No. It's something that I'm more conscious of, because I had to, and by that I mean tens of thousands a day.
I think we got to wrap this up, because I mean, this has been just wonderful. So you've got so much on the go. You've got a new tour coming this fall, and you're Canada and the US.
Yeah, and we're announcing the worldwide dates probably by the time this comes out, but it starts in February. It's called Average at Best. We want to set the bar where it needs to go.
I love that.
And then we've got the No Refunds special is on Crave and World of Wonder worldwide, and then the album is out at darcyandjair.com.
Oh, I love it. And I'm glad it's you. I'm glad that you're so conscious of the positivity and the way you impact people, and that you're so thoughtful about it, and there's not a pure exploitive sort of undertone to it. It's wonderful.
I'm trying. I always like to give Jer. I always say that Jer likes to use my mental health for clout, but it pays our mortgage, so it works.
Thank you for doing this. Thank you for being my friend for all these years.
Oh, thank you, buddy. Love you so much.
I love you too. And that's hey, look, I got a second camera that I don't use. So we're gonna we'll get this side of my fat face.
Nice.
Can you see the pimple?
No, I can't see it.
Courtney put makeup on it, but it's like I have it every time I turn this freaking thing on, a pimple pushes through the bottom of my nose out.
It's attracted to the heat.
Well, it really wants to make it itself. It's got its own career. Thank you for being here. I love you. I'm going to press stop here now. And I just need to...
We get it.
Okay, so we just listened to Darcy Michael's, just a fantastic sort of new voice and a phenomenon in the world of social media. And a key aspect of that discussion we had, first of all, let's welcome, Paul Whistle, neuroscientist, a regular guest on the show and co-host, if you will, for the Slow Learner.
As long as you'll have me.
Oh, I know you say that every time. It's only been twice so far, but that's still every time.
It is. I'm on a hot streak too.
So as a professor of neuroscience, Professor Whistle, he likes to be called Paul because we're friends. I don't know what your status is with him. So Mr. Whistle, Professor Whistle, Dr. Whistle, you run into him. I'm going to call him Paul. Remember that. He's going to help us sort of like unpack some of the really interesting ideas and concepts and maybe some mistakes that we made during the podcast, and maybe give a better foundation for the understanding of these ideas that Darcy and myself discussed. The first of which, we're just going to jump right into this clip here of Darcy. So I'll let him say it. Let's just listen to this right here.
But for me, I had to look back and go, oh my God, those 36 jobs I had between the age of 14 and 22. Oh my God, those friendships that I fucked up because I couldn't recognize hyperfixation or body doubling, or the biggest one was rejection sensitivity dysphoria. Like that ruined some of the most beautiful relationships I had in my life. And so you mourn this, and it's really hard to just forgive yourself, but you have to, because it's not your fucking fault. Nobody said it to you. Nobody helped you. Nobody said, hey, this is the way. And so then when we started looking at the content that was being put out, it was in this remorseful, apologetic kind of way where people were putting out content about rejection sensitivity or body doubling, being like, it just felt very down. And I was just like, I get this. This is all part of our little iceberg, but it is also an incredible gift. It is something that some of the greatest inventors, scientists, politicians, artists have ADHD, because our brain is fired. Our brain is working. And what a fucking great thing to celebrate.
Okay. So there's so much emotion and there's so much raw feeling coming from Darcy in expressing the pain and the sorrow of this is a really disruptive neurodivergent disorder, ADHD, and it has some interesting specific sets of like issues that he brought up. And one of them is, emotional regulation, and the other is rejection sensitivity dysphoria. Before we jump into that, can you clarify? I hadn't heard of this.
Yeah, I hadn't heard of it either. So just to clarify at the outset, not being a clinical psychologist, so please don't take this as an excuse to diagnose yourself. I know we all want to, but within the name, rejection sensitivity, this is about basically the reaction to rejection. So a lot of people understandably identify with this. It's like, oh, I don't like rejection either. Like, no one does. But the thing that's very particular about this is the reaction to rejection is extremely strong. The feeling following rejection would be very, very intense. So intense, some people might say it's unbearable. So most of us, we don't like it when we, upset someone, but this would be very, very bad and would take up your entire day. And so much so that you would alter your behavior in the future significantly to please others. Like you'd be a people pleaser in that sense, sometimes go against what you're thinking or say stuff you don't believe just because you're so afraid of upsetting someone. And when it were to happen, because it always does, even if you're doing your best, you again react very, very, very strongly. So this is thought to occur, I think it's like in a third of cases or something for ADHD. So it's more common there than it otherwise would be. Common enough that it would be something a person with that disorder will look into managing. And certainly if you were able to do so, could bring about a lot of improvement, I think, in quality of life overall. Yeah.
It really resonated with me. It's something that, like what you say is like you learn to sort of change your social interactions because you overly feel the emotional side of the reactive part of it, the reactive issue, which is how I choose, or not choose, but how I do react instinctively to the stimulus that I perceive as rejection. And I know for myself, as a comic who has to have a pretty thick skin, at times, I don't. And I especially when I was younger, I remember this shaping a lot of my social interactions. I mean, I remember like just certain little things would like really hurt socially in rejection terms. And so I adjusted in a different way. I sort of created this false overconfidence that I didn't care, which is,
started projecting a fake persona.
Yeah, but I did because I had that opportunity, because that also sort of translated into humor. It was a funny thing to do, to just be completely aloof to the social reactions that were just too painful for me to sort of interact with. And it's not a positive thing, but it was something that I realized that other people didn't seem to share with me on it, like a lot of people at least, of how painful like what you just described was. And so this is another one of those things that keeps unfolding as I sort of learn more about ADHD myself, that Darcy has done kind of an interesting job as sort of a pioneer and sort of voicing and creating awareness out there that he's helped me to become aware of, and me to get to discuss on terms of cognitive science and neuroscience, like understand it a little bit better, because that's one of the things that we both share. So I get to look at it in two forms, as a comic and through the scientific lens. And you've done an amazing job in at least taking your classes, of really putting a lot of understanding whilst also putting sort of boundaries on what we do know and what we can define and what we kind of have to sort of take as we're not sure of, but here's why we're not sure of. And so I kind of would like to take that into your field right now and sort of give, I think you have some opinions on what we should readily attribute to certain things versus, what should we look at in a certain classificatory term?
Yeah. So in this case, this is one of the interesting things. I think people want to know why they are a particular way, like why they are so sensitive. And certainly it's useful to consider that. But I think the problem is when people want a very clear medical explanation. Now, this is the unfortunate part. And I say this as a neuroscientist, you'd think I'd plug my field more. But our ability to explain behavior is not as great as believed. So there may be sort of imbalances in the brain, if you will, that would bring this about. But is that a productive view to take? Because does it cure anyone? Does it make anyone's symptoms better? Does it improve their quality of life? Does it predict who will have this problem later? The answer to most of those questions is like a pretty strong no. So the best approach to this for people who have it, whether they also have ADHD or not, there are things you can do in your own life. And, this is something you can talk about if you have, for example, if you're seeing someone about this problem. So I always find, like, as disappointing as it is for me to say this, that the neuroscience view is not as informative as it could be. Having said that, I'm going to offer what a neuroscientist might say could be involved, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's interesting, but we're not making and this is going to damage us as online presences. We're not going to say,
more
hey,
confidence.
Here's that trick. Here's that part of your brain that's causing you to do that, because there's no really one part of your brain that causes you to do anything. There's a multitude of contributory areas of your brain that work in synchronicity or adversity or cooperation, depending on how the structure manifests in your behavior. And here's one of those components that we've identified as being part of it. Yay.
So this
not as good a catchy headline.
Yeah, I always say this in class. It's like the story you tell in class, simple, cute, funny, memorable. If it's all those things, it's almost always wrong. Or at the very best, it's incomplete. So one way this has been framed is it's like any sort of emotional reaction that isn't controlled. You could, for example, have less prefrontal control, and you could have different processing by the amygdala. So these are parts of the brain that have been implicated in different functions. So prefrontal cortex, like right at the front here, if someone were to clock me in the head, that would be what they would hit. That would be the area of your brain. Well, it's involved in many things, but regulating emotions is among them. And then there are areas more generally involved in all forms of emotional processing, as well as other things. So whether that's positive emotions, like happiness, or negative ones, like the ones in rejection, sensitivity, dysphoria, would be the amygdala. And the argument is changes in these two structures may be part of what leads to strong emotional reactions there. And I want to add, probably in a lot of other cases too. Like it's not a restricted thing. So that would be one theory. But, and I was making this comment earlier to someone else, when you're dealing with a specific symptoms like this, or I shouldn't say symptoms because it's not technically a symptom, but when you're dealing with patterns of behavior like this, in association with ADHD, overall, ADHD has really only been intensively studied, well, at least the brain in ADHD has only been intensively studied recently. So I actually don't know a heck of a lot about that. That's going to come out later, I think, in the next 5, 10, or 15 years.
Why do stimulants have first of all, how do stimulants work on the brain neurochemistry?
Okay. So the big thing here is to consider two different things. One is the brain of the person with ADHD, and the second is the drug for ADHD. Because to appreciate the drug, you have to know about the brain of the person who would use it. So in ADHD, it's thought that there might be a number of brain differences. These have been well studied by a couple of people. If you were to take 1,000 people with ADHD and compare them to 1,000 people of the same age without the disorder and compare their brains, you might notice a number of differences. One of the ones that's often hit on is prefrontal cortex, like the area of the brain right here, right at the front, would be different. It might take longer to develop. It might be smaller in the adult. So they're wired differently in that sense. Now, why would this matter? Why would I mention this one brain area, not any one of the other many ones that might be different? Is because this particular brain area is involved in a lot of the thought processes and behaviors that are different in ADHD. So it's involved in things like executive function, cognitive control, paying attention, all that. All the things.
I missed that completely.
What was that again? Can you repeat that? Yeah. So the thinking was that those changes in the frontal lobe are in some way related to the symptoms of the disorder. Now, additionally, there's some other stuff to comment on, and this is more complicated as well, but there are thought to be changes in certain neurotransmitter systems. So your brain is made of neurons. Those are the cells in your brain, and those cells can communicate it in a chemical manner. So cell A, that is the neuron, will signal to its buddy, cell B, another neuron, using a chemical, a neurotransmitter. And one of the big ones, the ones people know about, is dopamine. And the idea is that in ADHD, that type of chemical signaling, that signaling with dopamine is different. People often like to say that it is lower or imbalanced, but it's actually really complicated the way in which it changes. But the point is that it does. So the idea here is that the brain in ADHD might be a little bit different in some way, particularly in cases where the symptoms might be more severe. Now, keeping that in mind, let's go to the second piece, which is the drugs.
Right.
The first-line drugs that are likely to be used, to my understanding, again, not a clinical psychologist, but this is my understanding, would be psychostimulants. And by and large, those are going to be interacting with that dopamine system. So the transmitter signaling that's a little bit different in the disorder might also be that which are targeted by the main drugs for the disorder. Now, if you want to really get into the weeds about it, what the drugs, that is the psychostimulants do, most of them do this, is they block the transport or movement of that chemical transmitter around. And that's going to affect how that signaling works.
So
now,
the reuptake of the dopamine, is that what you're talking about? Are you talking about the reuptake of the dopamine by the system?
Yeah, the uptake of it. So again, normally cell A is signaling to cell B, you release the dopamine, what cleans it up?
Yeah.
Garbage
normally
man,
it's reabsorbed.
garbage person picks up your garbage, and a transporter would pick up the dopamine.
Yeah. So it's like a dopamine function of what's also done with serotonin for moods.
Yeah, it's analogous to that. So that's a similar
reuptake
thing, but for a
inhibitor.
different transmitter.
Yeah.
A good comparison there. So when you're
Are you
dealing
surprised?
with
You taught me this in class.
Well, I didn't know you proposed comparing them, but it's a really good one. I try not to mention drugs when explaining other drugs.
No,
it's like
of
someone
course.
who's trying to explain a book to you that you haven't read by mentioning other books you haven't read.
Well, I
And
just thought I feel like a lot of the population has heard of SSRIs, so I thought.
Well, they have, but they actually, if you ask them what the acronym meant, there's a good chance they'd be like, "What does it?"
Oh
mean?
yeah, you're right.
Yeah,
But
it's
so
kind of
I was just trying to
AM and
communicate
PM.
the two.
Yeah.
Oh,
Anyways,
Okay,
the idea
so,
there
sorry.
is, to hit on here is that if you take a drug like that and you inhibit the transport of dopamine, the released dopamine stays there and keeps zapping its target and keeps signaling. Now, that's what happens in the short term. And in the long term, keeping that transmitter around, preventing it from moving around easily, is going to have all these long-term consequences. And it's presumably going to affect the brain in a beneficial way, leading to an improvement in symptoms. So you might start with abnormal prefrontal cortex structure and function, lower dopamine, and you might treat that, at least if you use a psychostimulant, by altering dopamine signaling in a subtle way. Now, the point I always have to make that people are always curious about is if that drug improves function in ADHD, will it work for me? Will I get smarter if I take it? Well, you're certainly likely to stay awake a little longer. But the idea there, most of the benefit of the drug is thought to be because you're dealing with someone who is already compromised. So to them, it is very helpful because their brain is wired differently. But to you, that would be a very different story. That would be the main treatment you would use. The second line treatments work in a different manner, but again, they're affecting signaling via neurotransmitters as well.
That come
As
from
they should.
pharmaceuticals,
Yeah.
notebooks, calendars, different things. And it sounds like it's not therapy, but for a lot of people whose lives are chaotic, getting in the habit of regularly using certain things whilst also, treating it pharmaceutically can have some remarkable adjustments. And that's just for like coping with like studying and stuff like that. There's also emotional dysregulation.
Yeah, which we were talking about earlier. Yeah.
Yeah. And sort of becoming aware of your emotions. This is something that's taken me a very long time. And I've done both in therapy myself, and I've studied it in school. The benefits of labeling, noticing, being aware of
I know
of
where
the
you're going
feelings.
with this one. Yeah, sounds very much like CBT type approach to
It is
organizing things. So tracking your thoughts, very data oriented, recognizing the ones that are maladaptive or problematic, putting effort into changing them, developing good routines.
Well, you just said one of the key words that is hard for people to hear about therapy, and I think it's not said enough because it is effort. And our culture as a whole wants immediate fixes. There's you'll choose something that, this will fix it now, versus this will have longer lasting, better effects over time. And the effort that you kind of have to put in, if you're not clear to people during psychotherapy, they get disappointed that it doesn't happen immediately. So I like to always mention it is work, but
in fairness,
it has great payoffs.
Yeah, they're starting, in a bad place. So I think it's kind of like when you're in that situation, it's very hard to do additional things as well. Speaking, to like I've had friends who've been through that road as you have, I imagine. So it's very difficult at the start. And after a while, it takes people to come out and then talk about the experiences they've had. But that's an important point, too, the idea that any drug treatment usually goes with therapy. A lot of people don't know this. They're really hoping just give me the pill and then I'll go home. Like this is not the way it works at all, unfortunately. Usually, the best way to do this is the long-term treatment. And the interesting thing is that some people enter in doing both when it works for them, and then might later decide the drug is not for them and continue with the other therapeutic interactions. I've known several people who've done this, and there are different ways to approach this, I guess. And again, talk to someone with experience in this area. But for ADHD at least, that can happen.
We're slightly off topic. That's the most common thing I hear about people that are trying to treat things with psychedelics. Like they don't talk to any therapist whatsoever. They're just like, I'm going to take a bunch of psychedelics and this will be cured. And I'm like,
sounds like you just want to take psychedelics, right? Well, that the whole thing with that I thought was like set and setting. Like, isn't there the work even more important in advance?
Exactly.
Like it's a big deal. And some of these, there are safety issues too. So you need to be around people who are familiar with them and monitoring them. Yeah. So that's the unfortunate side of things is I think many of these approaches do work and do improve people's lives quite a bit. The amount of work involved so that things are safe and they progress. I will add as well, just before finishing, that there are other, transmitters and other drug mechanisms to speak of, like noradrenaline is involved too, for example. So even the drug story is more elaborate. The point is this stuff isn't as simple as we want it to be.
And my working memory analysis was not accurate. I think I referred to working memory as being a characteristic of something that was involved in the ADHD, and I mislabeled that. It depends on whether I leave it in the edit or not. I might yank it out. But
because I don't know what's going to be in the final copy or not. We'll react to stuff.
I mislabeled as norepinephrine, noradrenaline as being a factor in sort of maintaining working memory.
That's actually not a ridiculous proposal. So the idea there is that
it's getting left in.
Okay.
No kidding.
The idea there is that there are cells within the prefrontal cortex that might be sensitive to those agents, those chemicals, and that if you were to affect the activity of those cells, you would be affecting working memory, for which they are partially responsible. How big that effect is another question, but that is a theory that adrenergic signaling in the prefrontal cortex is important for some forms of memory, in addition to attention.
This is great. This is so much good information quickly, and it's helpful. And I just want to do one other thing that me and Darcy talked about quite a few times, that came up, at least not explicitly, but indirectly, was the co-mentioning of autistic spectrum disorder concepts and ADHD as being linked somehow. Now, I've read different research that has sort of looked at a originating factor for potentially both. And could you sort of jump into that a little bit and explain why that might be a case?
ADHD and ASD?
There might be some, comorbidity between the two, or possibly a co-causal
and other things
mechanism
as well. Yeah. So first off, this is the idea of comorbidity. It would be basically more than one condition at the same time. So you don't have one disorder, you have two. And the interesting thing about things like ADHD is comorbidities of a certain type are frequent. So if you were to take a look in the population and look at the rate of ADHD, it would be at a certain rate, like around 1%. Like not everyone has it, clearly, is as well known as it is. And if you were to look at the rate of something else, autism spectrum disorder, or you could even use substance use disorder or whatever, again, it would be low, around 1%. They're disorders, they're rare. So you'd expect that the odds of someone having both of them would be extremely low, right? Because you've got to satisfy two unlikely conditions. And yet they're not. If you look at ADHD, low odds, and what would be autism spectrum disorder, for example, low odds, what is the likelihood that you'd have both those things? You'd be like, extremely low, it would never happen. And yet it does. It's about 20 times more common or something, some big number, than you would expect by chance, like much more common. And the fact that they co-occur together has led to a lot of theories as to why. So one theory is that they co-occur together because they have the same causes. So people with genes associated with ADHD, those genes are also associated with autism spectrum disorder. So you get the risks for one, you get the risks for the other free. It's 2 for 1, it's a great deal. Another approach is in the sense that the environmental factors are the same, or other risk factors are the same. So both autism spectrum disorder and ADHD are associated with older parental age, for example. So older parents, you're more likely to have both of those disorders than you otherwise would be. And that's the other thing now, is parents are older than they've ever been. I say this as one of the most ancient parents. People have families later for a variety of reasons, and some people don't. No judgment there, live your truth. But that's part of the reason, perhaps, that last point, why, among many reasons, the rate's going up a bit over time.
My parents were in their mid-40s when they had me.
No.
That's why I'm so riddled with ADHD. It makes perfect sense.
You shouldn't have had me in your mid-40s. Yeah, my parents had me, and let's see, I don't want to do the math. This is gross. This is like parental, conception math or whatever we want to call it. but it would be, let's see here. Yeah, it would be late 30s, early 40s. Yeah.
Yes.
So not that I have a special disorder. I'm not as interesting as all you creative types.
What I'm hearing Dr. Paul Whistle say is teen pregnancies are great.
Oh, that's the end of my career for sure. I'm not saying that, but that's a good soundbite. You should just put that there, and there'll be people at my door, rocks through my window, and it's
I don't think anybody gets that passionate over
no,
this
you don't
topic.
think so?
I don't know.
People
Maybe
are not that passionate about.
That's another stuff, but that is quite interesting. There's other interesting sort of cofactors and just little things before we move on about gender being involved.
Yeah.
Like there does seem to be a higher rate of diagnosis for both ASD and ADHD among males. Now, there's a really interesting connection to comedy here that I'm just going to quickly just throw in. One of the premier researchers for the link between sort of the gender-based alignment and potential causality of autism spectrum disorders is a researcher named Simon Baron Cohen, who is cousin to the very famous Sacha Baron Cohen. And so I wanted to throw that in here because,
imagine being a famous autism spectrum disorder researcher, just period, I should say.
Yeah.
And then it's like, you're not the famous one in your family. Oh, sorry, you came in second. Oh, it's like the Mannings in football or whatever. It's just, so close, sorry.
And that other one's more famous because he's done some insane things.
He has.
That
was like sort of generational for us following him, because he had that, for a period, he had that series of movies, like every, bam, bam. Obviously, everyone loves Borat,
Well, I was living in the UK, and Ali G was just such a
that
cultural phenomenon.
Yeah.
But he kind of hijacked sort of a lower class representational art when, in fact, he grew up upper class, and that is the latent criticism. But let's not get into that.
But is very in the weeds. Okay.
But
back to the original point.
But the link to the gender, though, I think this is kind of something that has to be taken with a grain of salt too. Whilst Simon Baron Cohen does point to sort of like a clinical representation in statistical sort of testosterone exposure prenatally to, similar sort of accountings of ASD. But one thing that I do like to draw out in science is that it's not been adequately tested or analyzed by the genders in test subjects equally, and thus we do have a skewing that perhaps it does manifest in women, but we haven't sort of found or studied it appropriately or used the correct samples. This seems to be something that's common in science, that a lot of the sampling or the studies are sort of slightly male biased. And I'm not saying that is the case. It's just something that should be acknowledged, that it could be a factor.
There is overall, and no, I don't want to call any one person out about this, because scientists as a community, this is something we weren't great at and we're getting better at doing.
Yes.
Historically, like, samples were biased heavily in one direction. The famous example being like pain disorders. This one's often brought up. Many of them more common in women, overwhelmingly researched in men and male animals and so on, like we said earlier. But so in this case, what we're awaiting is more inclusive research looking at these other groups. And this is not a political issue, it's actually a scientific issue, because there's nothing to say those other groups of individuals respond in the same way. Yeah.
And also mice. I might point out that we study more male mice than female mice because it's easier to do. And they use the genetically modified mice. Male mice are more readily available than the breeding female mice.
That one's a longer story. We do use more male mice, or we have certainly more historically. The reasons why, there are hundreds, but I feel in listing them, they will sound to your listeners like excuses, as if I'm trying to justify the mouse patriarchy. I'm not.
We're just putting in it's not as simple as one or two things.
Yeah.
We're trying to add nuance and the complexity to these narratives and stories about understanding like things like ADHD in a more complicated fashion. But I like having the veracity of a professor here to sort of
the veracity.
allow.
Oh God,
is that the right word? I don't even know.
I love that word. It's a beautiful word. But I want to make sure you actually get to your thoughts here, because we keep segueing in tangents and stuff. So we're talking about basically gender and autism spectrum disorder, if I'm listening
and possibly
correctly here.
ADHD as well, because they're both
Yeah,
overrepresented by male demographics.
Yeah. So this is an interesting thing. So I know a little bit more about the autism side of things, but gender atypical behaviors are very common in these groups. So as well as differences in gender identity and views on gender and so on, very common. More common, I should say, than would otherwise be expected. And there's actually a fair amount of research at this point saying that's the case. A lot of people have written about that. And I don't, like, some people are framing this as a terrible, awful thing. I'm not. Like, if you have atypical interests, I mean, who cares? Do it.
Well,
Great.
honestly,
you're enjoying it, you're good at it, fantastic. There are also theories that people with disorders, for example, are often among the best and most likely leaders in a particular area. Like, neurodivergent movement is arguing for this. Like, a lot of the people who progress very significantly in one field, absolutely obsessed with it. And that's like, they're arguing like autism spectrum disorder in that environment, that level of obsession, coupled with other great traits that you have as a person, as may lead you to success and so on. But so differences in gender attitudes. Another thing I want to add, you didn't ask about this, but it is an interesting note. The likelihood of two people who are neurodivergent getting together, it's surprisingly higher than would be expected by chance. So people tend to seek out others that are also different. There's this, they have this, I love words for this because scientists can find the lamest words for anything. So mating, there you go. That's what a scientist would call it. Don't call that in real life, but the idea here is that we have these innate partner preferences, people we like spending time with. You, for example, might be an extroverted people who likes extroverts, an open person who likes other open people, and so on. And you're more likely to end up with someone like that. Let's say that's a preference.
I have another theory.
Sure.
I say that we end up with similar people because all the normal people push us away.
You know what? It's like, great. Make that your speech. You know why I'm here, sweetie? You know why I'm here with you and no one else tonight, February 14th? It's because everyone else rejected me. This is a great speech.
Happy Valentine's.
Yeah. I should save that. That would be a huge hit in my house. But the idea there is that there is better communication, perhaps, of like-minded people in these respects. They are on each other's wavelength. And so the odds of two people with, like, a particular disorder like this getting together can be higher than be expected by chance. So the dry scientific term for this is assortative mating. Yes, like we don't mate randomly, we mate in a non-random way. In this case, we mate around trait similarity. And as you pointed out, there are other theories. Your one is the darkest one. It's like we're left behind, so of course we have to get together. But other theories are like, there's like gateway theories, for example. So you have your trait would lead to you both being in the same community where you met. So, for example, two intelligent people, very likely to get together, more likely than would be expected by chance. But an easy way of explaining that is you have to be intelligent to get into school and get a job. And so people who meet in their job are likely to have around the same intelligence.
Well, and that kind of comes back to comedy too. Yeah. Like this is, there seems like there's an overrepresentation of ADHD in
among creative people as well too.
Yeah.
What was the other one I think we were talking about was bipolar disorder, notably higher. Many different psychological disorders might be higher in that community. There's actually a really interesting book about that I can recommend if anyone out there is interested.
Yeah. We'll put a link at the end.
Send that along. But for ADHD or bipolar disorder and for depression as well, these seem to be a bit higher in people who would identify as creative or be successful artists than would be otherwise expected. Now, this is where you get to the more controversial part where I don't want to overinterpret, but a lot of people hear this and they want to make the causal jump.
Right.
That the disorder is what makes you great. I know I kind of hinted earlier it could, but that's not evidence that it does. It could be just one roadblock you have to deal with as well. As a last thought on that,
I don't think it's, as somebody who's been through it, I think my life would be a hell of a lot easier and I'd be doing way better.
You'd be doing, so you're doing comedy in spite of that, not because of that. Yeah. And I think it's wonderful you point that out because that, again, I find that simple causal theory not only too simple, but also a bit offensive. Like, I was going to say John Mulaney has a joke about this in one routine that I've seen where he basically complains about this idea that everyone with a disorder is funny, and you see someone without a disorder, it's like he was depressed, but he didn't have the decency to be funny. Like that's the joke, and it's a good one, but it reflects this idea that these two things. Sorry, it's moving again. It reflects this idea that these two things have to go together, and they don't. They don't.
Over your shoulder or something.
It's
so that it's
so
not
hard
hitting.
to keep this in place. I get too excited and I move around.
And then we're going to jump into this next part. And we're going to do it a little faster, but I love this. This was nice. It was a good balance of foundation and explanation. Let's keep it going. So let's okay. So for this next part, I'm being a bit selfish here because I'm using me and what I said, but this is an interesting concept, and Darcy found it interesting as well. And I kind of want to put it to the test because I did draw on this sort of deductive theory, and I wrote this idea once on a post years ago after taking your class about hecklers. And and this is neuroscience. This is sort of linked more linked behavior to sort of the neurophysical components of our brain makeup and possibly damage, but how our frontal lobe is structured and how it sort of have sort of somewhat of social inhibition and might be characterized by heckler behavior. So I'm just going to play this quick, and this is me.
This is a wonderful journey we're on right now.
This is a clip of me, which seems so ridiculous to do because I'm actually here. I don't have to play a clip of me, but this is what I said. So I've started doing this thing where I'm diagnosing hecklers.
That's great because they need it.
Yeah, I try to imagine what part of the brain is damaged, like the medial OFC that creates a disconnect between the consensus of self and the outward sort of reflective appearance of self, and sort of self-monitoring and the characteristics of knowing when you're behaving poorly in a social environment. You can't see it at that moment, but you do recognize it if you watch it from a third party, if it's shown to you on video. There's all these neat little sort of psychological impacts of brain damage. And the OFC gets damaged a lot in people that have a lot of frontal impact, like punching or car accidents. So they lose this ability to sort of self-moderate in certain cases, So that's one of my go-tos if somebody's like particularly not learning.
Yeah, oh, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. And typically people with comedy shows tend to have a lot of frontal lobe damage anyway.
So that's very funny by Darcy at the end there. But it's something, and I've thought about, and this hasn't been officially tested. Of course, this isn't scientific. This is speculative, but I am correlating it to some things that do have some basis in science, which is the orbital frontal cortex and its function in regulation and behavior. Yeah. And so I kind of want to go, am I full of it by saying stuff like this? Or
you're not. You're actually, that's a pretty good description in general. So just the highlights of it. Again, we were talking earlier, you have your brain here, your frontal cortex is a part of the front. And if you were to have a head impact, it's among the first that would be injured, obviously.
It's crazy how sharp behind our eyes is.
So I'm getting to that one.
Yeah.
The orbital frontal is right around here next to the orbital bone, like in this zone here. I don't want to poke my eye, so I'm being very careful. And it's right next to a bone. And the idea is with a head impact and the movement of the brain, it will be shredded or damaged very easily. So it's one of the areas that's perhaps most likely to be damaged with a lot of different head impacts. It's the effects of damage on it are therefore great interest. Now, they've done a lot of...
The brain's not resilient either, is it? It's not like it's not like a strong, it's not like hard like people might imagine. It's like a big ball of snot.
Yeah, the brain is, it's more like Jello actually. Yeah. So it's not like your bone basically. So the skull is like hard. Yeah. The brain is like Jello that's in basically fluid. That's what's going on in there. And in terms of resiliency, to go deeper into that concept, like brain damage isn't like any other kind of damage. So if you damage your skin, damage a lot of different parts of your body, you get better. There is regeneration, recovery of tissue, new cells are made, the wounds heal. Not like that as much in the brain, no. Because cells lost in the brain, at least neurons, let me be specific, lost generally don't come back. Like we don't have good evidence for that or good therapies to do that. That's not something that happens. So the impacts have very significant effects and they tend to be lasting effects. Now you do get recovery of function, but the reason why isn't you regain lost neurons, because that's not going to happen. It's because your brain rewires in a way to compensate. It's like the whole brain is like, okay, we've lost that. Let's reorganize and try and achieve normal function again. So these impairments are very real, very lasting, not easily circumvented, and won't get better certainly on their own. The orbital frontal, in terms of its function, if you do correlative studies between orbital frontal damage and behavior, you would notice a lot like what you described, altered self-image, particularly unrealistically positive self-image. Like they tend to see themselves as absolutely fantastic. I love how you're like, ooh, yeah, that sounds like me.
Hey, bam, I feel better.
Yeah, and self-monitoring difficulties. So as you were pointing out, they'll be in a social situation and they're not like tracking things moment to moment. For most of us, we're looking at people's eyes, we're reading the room constantly, and we're automatically making adjustments in our behavior. And when things don't go right, we immediately, make a different move. We recognize when we're talking too long. Hopefully, I'm not talking too long here, and so on, or talking over someone. We know not to do these things. We stop ourselves when we are. But people with orbital frontal cortex damage, the idea is they may struggle with that, as well as other things like prioritization of action. They may have trouble organizing their lives, and substance use disorder or impulse control disorders might be more common. Yeah, there's a lot of different things that area of the brain does. It's it's also involved in smell and taste too. I'm not joking.
They have a lot of similar problems with ADHD in a way, and which is weird. Like the way you're describing, like focus, executive function,
Yeah. In that sense, that last set, but those are more attentional ones. Self-monitoring in social situations, very particular. It's funny to look at someone's like, yeah, I don't encourage this, but I know what type of brain damage you have.
I've literally said that on stage.
That's good. You're a comedian. If I were to do that, it's the end of my life as I know it.
But there's one characteristic in particular that stands out to me, and I find this sort of almost a solution to a lot of behavioral issues, because clubs can have significant problems with audiences and hecklers, and one of the most consistent things is they are completely unaware that they are causing a problem. And from a comedian's perspective, this is just mind-boggling.
Yeah,
because we can see the entire room and we can see the people that are bothered by it, and it bothers us. And when a heckler sort of reacts or is constantly interrupting or talking, and then you address them a couple of times. Now, of course, the disinhibition caused by alcohol, the environment is a major source of that, most likely. But once in a while, you'll come across people that just seem like there's something wrong. And I've always thought they need to see a video of their behavior, because like the studies say, is that the people are unaware of how they're behaving, but when they're shown a video of how they're behaving.
That would be an interesting experiment to do. It's like hunt down the hecklers at the show afterwards. Like I remember at Sarah Silverman, this isn't heckling, but it was still super annoying. She's telling this moving story about the loss of a family member, and someone's like, "Woo, you go!" And I was like,
"Oh right, yeah, I remember that." Yeah,
like I am terrible with people, but even I know not to do that.
She got that twice.
More than once. Yeah. And I don't know if it was the same person, but
no, it's on opposite sides of the audience.
Handled it like. I love how you can triangulate where it's coming from. That's experience for you.
As a comic, I'm like right away, I was trying to isolate exactly who said that when they shouted out.
So it may be a case that they're not monitoring in the moment. It may be the case that, they've had something to drink. But the other theory is I think legitimately certain people believe that such things are funny or a display of strength. Like by and large, heckling is not funny. It's not. It's, I don't think it ever plays out that way.
You heard that from a scientist, folks.
Yeah. Well, no, okay. I shouldn't say I'm analyzing this as a scientist, but as as someone who watches a lot of performances, like people are like, "Oh yeah, I really loved how you dealt with that heckler," and it's like they think that's comedy, and I think those are the type of people who think heckling also adds something to the environment. But it just strikes me as kind of like a dominance display, if anything, like, look at me, how cool I am. I could do your job. You're terrible, sort of thing. And
It makes me wonder what it would be like to do like a show for like just boxers, or just like people that might be susceptible to high levels of OFC damage. Like,
I'm not letting the brain damage thing go.
Well, some of that stuff's quite interesting. Yeah, but also from the other side, being on stage with ADHD has problems as well. Like I have sensory processing disorders as well. So I get very bothered by like a flashing light in a room. And of course, nobody facing it is bothered by it. But me, I'm like, or it's somebody like making a specific noise that is repetitive and stuff. And it's not fair to them as the audience, but sometimes I won't be able to differentiate that this is just bothering me. That's a tough amount of mental lifting that is part of the burden that you have to carry with ADHD and with some of these sensory processing and being neurodivergent as a whole, is that you have to regularly pause and you have to question your interpretation of your perception.
That's those are the stories that I hear when people describe their lived experience of what it's like. Like a lot of the things that are probably unconscious for people that happen automatically are not for you. And it's exhausting, but you have to get in the moment and think, what is happening here? Are they upset? Is it time to go? Have I talked for two? And it's a different, like the results will be better if you do that, but it's not easy. And sometimes it's not fun. No. And I don't know what else to say about that other than my heart goes out to people in that position. Well, it's a lot of work in the moment, and it's like a different life. Yeah.
On that point, I can hear my cat letting me know that she needs to be fed. And I would like to just sort of wrap this up because sure. I think I'd like to wrap it up on this. I'd like to just have a really quick, honest discussion. I think it's kind of wonderful what Darcy and Jer have done.
Yeah, that would be my view too. Like, it's wonderful that there's this story of overcoming, I think, it's like, this is what I had. I'm a bit different. You're a bit different. And that message, I think it's a wonderful one. Like when you're in that position, especially when you first discover there's something different about you, it's really nice to know that it gets better and great things can happen. And also it's just like, it's a more authentic take in that it's honest. It's like, this was hard and this is wonderful and so on. So, it's not this dry, purely academic take here or this and so on, which is important, but the other stuff is too. It has to come all together. Also great in that it draws attention to something that we need to pay attention to, that shouldn't be, I think, understated and should be taken very seriously. So there's that element as well. And it's just funny. Like, can I say that? I'm like,
no,
also
not good. On this show. You can't.
No, it is not funny.
I got to thank you again, Professor Russell, for coming and offering just a better context and a way for people to sort of understand this in a little bit more of a scientific lens and in putting things, out there, just pushing this forward for everybody to understand. I love having you here. I love your contribution. Thanks for coming to Sarah Silverman. That was fun.
Thank you again. Well, that was,
I love that you brought it up in the discussion too. It's like, you drew from that. I didn't realize that. I didn't realize you were studying stuff to bring up.
And I remember saying, just to troll you, I'm going to take you to a musical comedian.
I love musical comedians. They're fantastic. Actually, I have one musical comedian that I absolutely love, and maybe I'll get him on the show.
Is it Adam Sandler?
No.
I just did that just to see your reaction.
He's very funny. He's funny. I don't really know anything about Adam's stand-up.
I'm just trolling. But thank you.
You're trying to corner me.
It's my pleasure to be here.
Thanks for having you, and thanks for joining us on the Slow Learner. And we're going to put some of those links on the bottom. I think there's a book on there. We're going to put a link to Darcy's tour and some dates and how to see them and watch them. And if you enjoyed this, as always, please tell your friends, share, like, put a click on there. And if you don't like this, click don't like and leave and never come back. Also, we love your feedback. We'd love to hear from you. What do you like? What do you don't like? We want to adapt. We're a slow learner in this. This is a new medium for us. And feedback means the world to us. Even if please just be respectful, but feedback. I mean, we need to know. We don't know what you're loving and what you're hating and what you'd like to hear more of. And I think that would be it'd be awesome to hear from you. All right. Thanks a lot.